Hey guys, how you doing? Ron the Nut here. It's been a while since I put out a video. I've been really busy with work and family, and but I promised to put out some benchmarks on the RAID setup that I have running, and finally collected up all the RAID files that I had because I collected those benchmarks over time. I did not have a test bench set up and put each configuration in and ran it and recorded it. So anyway, I'm gonna give you that now, and but for those of you who have been following my videos, this is my system. My dream system is based on a MSI Big Bang X Power 2 motherboard, the X79 chipset. It's got an i730 930K processor under there, running at stock speeds. There's 32 gigabyte of Corsair Dominator RAM, and those are running at 1600. And there's a couple of GTX 680s here that are in SLI. And then really what this is about is these two cards up here. I've got an OCZ Revodrive 3 X2, 240 gig drive. That's my operating system and main applications drive. Um, And then on the LSI RAID controller, it's an LSI 9260-8i, and currently it's configured with 120 gigabyte Vertex 3s. That's the current configuration, and there are also connected to the motherboard chipset on the SATA 3 port, the 6 gigabyte per second port. There are two terabyte drives. One's a Seagate um, Barracuda XT with the 6 gigabyte interface, SATA 3 interface, and the other is a regular standard Samsung SpinRite 2 terabyte drive. Both of them are 7200 RPM drives, but the Samsung is not a SATA 3 interface drive. So anyway, with that said, one of the things you might notice is this is a video recording application. I don't do a good job with my video recorder recording stuff off my displays. I need to learn how to do a better job of that. So I'm trying something new for this anyway, since I'm just giving you a bunch of screenshots. All right, so let's see here. Now we'll go into the some of the benchmarks. Like I said, I recorded a lot of this over time as I built the system, so I had to find all these benchmarks. To start off, what I did here is I use basically three applications for the benchmarks. I used right here. You have ASSD. ASSD has a write and read section, and it's the ones that I focused on are sequential read and writes, and that's for a 1 gigabyte file. That's what they use for recording the speed, the megabytes per second that you'll see. And then you also have 4K random read and write. That's a random chunks of 4K that are randomly written. That'll give you these results. I'm not really too sure about this 4K random with 64 thread count. The 64 threads. I'm not sure about that. And then access time, there's some formula for how they calculate access time. I think the read is against the whole disk, and I'm not sure what the write is. And then they give you a score. So that's ASSD. That's you can log on and read all this detail on how it performs those things. But that's one of the benchmarks I use. Another one I used was Crystal Diskmark, and that one here has also sequential write, and that is also let me see here. That says just measure sequential reads and writes and random ones. The random does in blocks of 512 KB, 4K, and 4K at a Q depth of 32. And then I left it all stock, whatever the application starts up with. I think it's zero fill. That's what I used. So those of you who use Crystal Diskmark, you recognize these, and you'll see these results. So the one that I prefer is ATTO. ATTO disk benchmark transfer sizes from 512 to 8 megabytes. and the lengths can be anywhere from 64K to 2 gig for the transfer lengths, and it supports the various queue depths. You see everything here, and what I really like is yeah, you can see all this on one screen, on one display. You see what's going on. Um, you have here you can put in information on if you got a RAID set up, stripe size, control by, and then in here you put information on your system. Then down here you get into the 5K through 1 gig um, worth of file sizes is what was set up here, and these are the write and read results that you get for those, and then these are the sizes, the increments that you plug in. I left it default when I ran mine, and you'll see what I have set up. At any rate, here is these are the 3 different benchmarks that I used. With that now, I'll take you to the results of these. Now, hopefully you'll be able to read these okay. This set right here of benchmark results is for the Samsung spin rate. So for ATTO, you see I had it running. The transfer sizes of the block sizes were 512 up to 8 gig. I use a lot of big video files, and although they're not, well, some of them get up there, but so that was just the default that I use. All of them are set that, and then the length, the 256 megabyte files is what was used for the read-write results that you see on these here. Okay, and the queue depth was 4K. So here we have ATTO shows you for a spin-write drive on a SATA 3 interface, although it doesn't have a SATA 3 interface on the drive itself, just the motherboard it was connected to. They were all connected to the same port or chipset. You'll see here these are all at about 140, roughly 140 megabytes per second for write and read. And then over here on our ASSD, you have the sequential read and writes gave you 130, 101, and then the 4K random gave you 40.42 megabytes and 0.96 megabytes per second, and it gave you a score of 32 total. Now I ran this a few times, I remember, and I had scores of 135 and 111 and 115 and 129. So probably, in a lab setting, you would want to run these at least 3 times each and get an average. But I didn't do that. This is just for our own entertainment and information here. The next one is the 2 terabyte Barracuda XT. On the same thing on the SATA 6 port on the motherboard. Same settings. And this ran a little bit slower. You can see it's 127 megabytes per second and about 128, 129 for reads. And then you'll see here about 123 and 123 both read and write. So it's close to what is shown here. And then again, the 4K here is a little bit different for these results. And then a score of 37. Now using ASSD, you see that between the two, there's 5 points difference. And so for those of you who are considering buying a mechanical drive, I wouldn't spend the extra money if there is a big difference in buying one that has the SATA 3 interface on the hard drive. I don't see the benefit. I think I've heard and read other reviews that say basically the same thing. So that's using ASSD, and then for ATTO, you see it actually didn't perform as good with the exact same setup as the other drive did. Now, one thing to note though, the SpinRite drive, the Samsung, that only had a couple of gig used on it. The Seagate had about 1 terabyte, half of it used. I had that as archiving a lot of stuff, so that may be one of the reasons why it didn't perform quite as fast as the Samsung, but I don't know for sure. And then here you can see this is a Vertex 3 120 gig drive just all by itself on that same port on the motherboard, and you'll see it's significant, so more than twice as fast as the 2 mechanical hard drives. 350 average up here, 350 megabyte per second writes, and the reads are up around 400. And then down here you'll see the reads are 372, and the writes it scored a 162 on this on ASSD. But you'll see the scoring. And now again, this is ASSD, so these applications are written for SSD, so that could be another reason why um, the mechanical drives fared extremely poorly. And I know I have a bad sector on that drive. Okay, so that is comparison of a couple of mechanical drives to one SSD off the motherboard. Next, we have results of the Revodrive. That Revodrive 3x2 is it's basically a RAID setup on a PCI card. It is very fast. Under Crystal Disk Mark for the sequential, you had 662 megabytes per second reads and 227 megabyte per second writes. And then the 512 K blocks, 512 and 204. Now for ASSD, the sequential was 734 for read and 221 for write, so kind of close to what you see in Crystal Disk Mark. And the 4K blocks are different. That one's 23 and 53. Actually, those are close to what Crystal Disk Mark has here on its 4K, but I'm not sure if they implement them exactly the same. OCZ Revodrive itself under ATTO was scoring up when you get to the larger block sizes at 1.2 gigabytes per second for writes and up into 1.5, 1.6 gigabytes per second for reads. Now, you know what, I made a special note here, running it 4 times in a 4-time slot. One of the things I learned on the MSI Big Bang when I had my GTX 680s installed in slots 1 and 5 in order to give them some air to cool, because I didn't have them underwater right away. I had a gap in there, and when you do that, it changes the configuration of the speed of the other PCI slots on that bus. So at the time when I put them in that way, you can see right here it was running in the slot that it was in when I had the GTX 680s in slots 1 and 5 at like a 1 time. So it was dismal. This ran worse than the 120 gig Vertex 3 off the motherboard. You see 353 for writes and 408 400s and reads. But of course, when I moved them for the video cards to slots 1 and 3, then the slot that this was in came back up to at least 4, probably was 8 times, and it ran significantly faster. So that OCZ drive screams. It's an awesome drive. I've not really ever had any problems with it. And that's the Revodrive that I'm talking about. Now, before I start showing you the RAIDs, let me show you the RAID profile. This is the current RAID profile, and it is the same when I had 4 Vertex 3s in a RAID 0. I have the 8 here. You'll see formats down 890 gig. Each of the drives formats down individually to 111 gig. And then you see here it's a RAID 0, the 890. Stripe size is 64K. Virtual disk state optimal, disk cache unchanged, always read ahead. I/O policy direct I/O, current write policy write back. I do have a battery backup unit on the on this LSI controller, and that helps performance a little bit. And then the access policy is read write. So that is the RAID configuration. Now you get to see the results of the benchmarks with this 4 Vertex 3 120 gig drives on that RAID controller. So back before I could afford to add the additional 4 ran at, according to Crystal Disk Mark, sequential test results was 1.3 gigabytes per second for reads and half a gig per second, 544 megabytes per second for writes, and then a 512K blocks. 1.1 and 680 megabytes per second. Now for ASSD, the sequential read was 1.5 gigabytes per second and 465 megabytes per second for writes. Then the 4K blocks you can see, and those are, again, they're different. So although they both say 4K, I don't think they're implemented the same. So But ATTO, again, leaving it the same as all the other ones. You can see here that now we're talking up in the, I'm sorry about this. The 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 in writes, gigabytes per second in writes, and then over, look at this, 2.5 gigabytes per second in reads. So for these larger block size, this guy was screaming. So that is the RAID with 4 drives. Now we're going to look at the RAID with 8 drives. This is the results with Crystal Diskmark. 1.7 gigabytes per second for sequential read and 1 gig for writes. That's 512 blocks is 1.3 and 1. And then underneath ASSD you had 1.9 and 1.2. So look at that, 1.9 gigabytes per second and 1.2 for writes. And then ATTO, you will see here the writes are up like 1.3, about around 1.39 for writes. And then the highest it got was, looks like 2.4, so 2.3 gigabytes per second and reads. Again, nothing's changed. All of the settings are the same. So still very, very fast. And then we have here a comparison between the this is just a comparison between the Revodrive X2 and the just one SSD drive off the motherboard. So you can see that basically it's almost twice. The Revodrive has got on the big blocks 1.2 gigabytes per second in writes and reads 1.5, 1.6, and then the SSD drive itself off the motherboard is only, again, a lowly 350s, 350s and 400s in reads. So from ASSD you can see that it doubles. Now this is a 120 gig drive, that's a 240, and again, but this is running off a PCI bus, not through the chipset. Next we have comparing the Revodrive to the 2 RAIDs. So here you'll see here is under writes 1.2 gig per second under the bigger blocks, and then 1.5, 1.6 on reads. For the 4 drives in RAID 0, again 1.4, 1.5, so a little bit faster than what you see here, and then reads significantly faster, about a whole gig faster at 2.6, 2.7 versus 1.6, 1.5. And then the RAID with 8 drives, if you'll notice here, 1.3, 1.4, it's a little bit slower than the 4 in RAID 0. So you got 1.3, closing on 1.4 for writes, and here you had 1.4, 1.5, and then under reads you got 2, 2.3, 2.4, and then you actually hit some blocks, got 2.7 gigabytes per second, 2.6. So performance-wise, as they were at the time I ran them, the 4 edged out a little bit from the 8 drives in RAID 0. And percentage-wise, data on when I had 480 gigs versus 960 or the 860, probably percentage-wise what I had filled on them at the time is about the same, I think. So I don't know about if that made a difference. And then finally, what I wanted to show you is with the LSI controller, you can buy this controller. You can buy a hardware key called a FastPath key, and you install that key onto the controller, and it's supposed to boost your write and read performance. And you can see what I showed in the last screen, but this is a bigger shot of it. This shows the performance here, topping out at around 1.3. One hit close to hit 1.4 on writes, and then reads, 2 on average. What is that? About 2.3 gigabytes per second for reads. With the FastPath key installed, you see now that this is 1.8, about 1.8 gigabytes per second on the writes, and then the reads closing in on 3 gigabytes per second. So the difference between these 2 and the writes is roughly about half a gig. It's about 500 megabytes more per second on writes, and let's see here, 2.3 to 2.9. Yeah, another 600 megabytes per second for reads. So it does definitely add performance, significant amount of performance um, to the performance of the card. So now, for video editing and gaming, this card is totally overkill. But I was fortunate enough and blessed to be able to come up with the scratch, found some good deals on some additional drives, and I was able to put it together in my dream system. So in a server application with a lot of I/O, that is where this card really, really shines, and you get your biggest bang for your buck. But I enjoy and have no wait times on anything, and so far it's been reliable, but it hasn't been that long. So I'll let you guys know if any problems crop up. I do have some things that I'm jonesing to do another build. And I have some questions since I have quite a few subscribers added. I'm going to ask you guys for some recommendations. I got a couple of builds that I can do, and nothing as fancy as this one. So if you're looking for another epic build like this, you'll be disappointed. But it's going to be a water cooling build. But anyway, I'll get a video together to get some input before I get started on that. So thanks, guys. If you like, please like and favorite, and subscribe if you're new. And I appreciate it. So that's it from Ron's a Nut for now. Thanks a lot.